So there I was, Jake Martinez, standing in front of what could only be described as the universe's most intimidating military school, wondering if my career counselor back on Earth had a serious grudge against me. The Zephyrian Combat Academy loomed before me like a crystalline mountain that someone had decided to carve into the shape of pure intimidation. Seriously, whoever designed this place clearly never heard of the concept of making visitors feel welcome. The shuttle had dropped me off at the main entrance, where a holographic sign cheerfully proclaimed excellence through pain in 17 different languages. How reassuring. As I dragged my pathetic Earth-issued duffel bag up the steps, I couldn't help but notice that every other species seemed to arrive with military precision and enough gear to outfit a small army. Meanwhile, I looked like I was heading to summer camp. The lobby was a testament to alien architectural showboating. Soaring ceilings, walls that seemed to shift color based on some algorithm I couldn't figure out, and students from species I'd only seen in textbooks casually walking around like this was totally normal. Which for them, it probably was. That's when I met my roommate. "Oh fantastic," came a voice dripping with sarcasm from behind me. "They've assigned me a human." I turned around to find myself face to face with what looked like a 7-foot-tall lizard who'd been hitting the gym religiously and had serious anger management issues. His scales were a deep emerald green, and his eyes had that predatory gleam that suggested he was mentally calculating how many different ways he could probably kill me. "Vex Thornscale," he said, not bothering to extend what I assumed was a hand, but looked more like a collection of very sharp claws. "Draknari warrior caste, 3rd generation Academy legacy, and apparently your new roommate. Lucky me, Jake Martinez," I replied, trying to match his energy. "Human, 1st generation everything, and apparently about to make your life very interesting." Vex snorted, which sounded like a steam engine having respiratory problems. "Interesting is one word for it. Tell me, human, what exactly do your kind bring to combat training? I've read your species files. No natural weapons, no enhanced strength, no armor plating, no psychic abilities. You're basically walking targets with opposable thumbs. Now, here's the thing about being underestimated. It's annoying, sure, but it's also incredibly useful. I'd learned that lesson the hard way growing up in Detroit, where looking harmless could be the difference between walking home safely and explaining to the emergency room why you had tire tracks on your forehead. "Well," I said, hefting my bag with what I hoped looked like casual confidence, "we're very good at surprising people." Vex's laugh sounded like gravel in a blender. "I'm sure you are. Come on, let me show you to our quarters. Try not to get lost on the way. The Academy has a strict policy about students who can't navigate basic hallways." As we walked through corridors that seemed designed by someone who really wanted to make sure you never felt safe, Vex explained the Academy's social hierarchy with the enthusiasm of someone describing a particularly brutal food chain. At the top were the Scions, the telekinetic golden children who could probably crush your skull just by thinking about it. Below them were the various warrior castes like his own Draknari, followed by the tech specialists, and then everyone else. "And humans?" I asked, though I was pretty sure I already knew the answer. "Humans," Vex said with obvious amusement, "are what we call a learning experience. You're here because the Galactic Council decided it would be diplomatically awkward to exclude Earth from the Academy program. But let's be honest, nobody expects you to actually graduate." Our room turned out to be a sterile box with 2 beds, 2 desks, and all the personality of a medical examination room. Vex immediately claimed the side near the window, which seemed reasonable until I realized the window looked out onto the Academy's main training arena, where students were currently engaged in what appeared to be full-contact combat that would probably be illegal in most civilized star systems. "Evening entertainment," Vex explained, noticing my stare. "Every night, advanced students demonstrate proper technique by beating the stuffing out of volunteers. It's educational." I watched a bird-like creature with wings that could probably generate hurricane-force winds systematically dismantle what looked like a walking tank made of rocks. The crowd of watching students cheered with the kind of bloodthirsty enthusiasm usually reserved for gladiatorial combat. "Educational," I repeated. "Right." Vex settled onto his bed, which groaned under his weight. "Don't worry, human. You probably won't be expected to participate in the advanced demonstrations. The Academy has insurance concerns." As I unpacked my laughably small collection of belongings, I couldn't help but smile. Everyone here seemed very confident about what humans could and couldn't do. They'd obviously done their research, studied our military history, analyzed our physical capabilities, and come to the logical conclusion that we were the galactic equivalent of training dummies. Which was perfect. Because there's one thing about humans that apparently doesn't show up in official files: we're really good at being underestimated. And even better at making people regret it. My first day of classes was like a nature documentary about apex predators, except I was apparently the gazelle. The Academy's dining hall looked like someone had thrown together every science fiction movie's idea of intimidating alien cafeteria and then cranked it up to 11. Long metallic tables stretched across a cavernous space, filled with creatures that could probably bench press a small spacecraft. I grabbed what I hoped was food from the dispenser and was looking for somewhere to sit that wouldn't result in me becoming someone's breakfast entertainment when a voice called out from across the room. "Fresh meat over here." The voice belonged to Luna Brightfeather, and I have to say, whoever named the Skylary species had a serious sense of irony. Luna looked like someone had crossbred a peacock with a fighter jet and given the result an attitude problem. Her feathers shifted through a spectrum of colors that probably had some kind of intimidation purpose, and her beak looked sharp enough to open cans. "Come on, human," she chirped, which somehow managed to sound condescending even though chirping should theoretically be adorable. "Don't be shy. We want to get a good look at Earth's contribution to galactic defense." I made my way over to her table, where I was introduced to what Luna cheerfully described as the Academy's finest specimens. There was Grunt Ironhide, who looked exactly like what you'd expect if someone decided to build a person out of crystalline rock formations and then forgot to give him a neck. He communicated primarily through rumbling sounds that seemed to come from somewhere deep in his chest cavity. "Grunt says you look fragile," Luna translated helpfully. "He's concerned you might break if someone looks at you too hard." "That's very thoughtful of him," I replied, settling into a chair that was clearly not designed for human proportions. "I'll try not to shatter during casual conversation." The real star of the table, though, was Zara Voidstrike. If the Scions were the Academy's golden children, then Zara was their crown princess. She had that ethereal floating slightly above her chair thing going on that telekinetic species apparently couldn't resist showing off. Her skin had a faint luminescent quality, and her eyes were the kind of deep violet that suggested she could probably read your thoughts, rearrange your furniture, and critique your life choices all at the same time. "Jake Martinez," she said without looking up from her meal, which was hovering in front of her while she ate without using her hands. "Human. Age 22. Military Academy graduate from Earth's North American region. No psychic ability. No enhanced physical capabilities, standard human emotional range with tendencies towards sarcasm and stubbornness." I blinked. "Did you just scan my brain?" "I don't need to scan anything," Zara replied with a smile that suggested she found my existence mildly amusing. "Your species broadcasts your thoughts through your facial expressions like a primitive communication system. It's actually quite fascinating from an anthropological perspective." Luna ruffled her feathers, which created a sound like wind chimes in a hurricane. "The question is, what exactly do humans think they're going to accomplish here? The Academy isn't a cultural exchange program. This is military training for actual combat scenarios." Before I could answer, the dining hall's attention was suddenly focused on the entrance, where a figure in an instructor's uniform had just walked in. Commander Blade Stormwind looked like someone had taken the concept of military bearing and sculpted it out of scar tissue and bad attitude. He was from one of the warrior species, though I couldn't immediately identify which one, and he carried himself like someone who had personally won several small wars before breakfast. "That," Luna whispered, "is the Academy's head combat instructor. He's the one who decides whether students advance to the next level or get sent home in disgrace. He's also the one who's been most vocal about the human inclusion program being a waste of Academy resources." Commander Stormwind's gaze swept across the dining hall and landed on our table. More specifically, it landed on me. He made his way over with the kind of purposeful stride that suggested someone was about to have a very bad day. "Cadet Martinez," he said, his voice carrying the kind of authority that made you want to stand at attention even when you were sitting down. "I trust you're finding the Academy educational." "Very much so, sir," I replied, trying to sound appropriately respectful while also not seeming intimidated. "I'm learning a lot about galactic military traditions." "Traditions," the commander repeated, as if the word tasted unpleasant. "Yes, I'm sure you are. Tell me, Cadet, what do you think Earth brings to galactic defense that the other species at this table don't already provide?" It was clearly a test, and probably not one I was expected to pass. Luna's feathers were practically vibrating with anticipation, Grunt was making what might have been amused rumbling sounds, and Zara was watching with the kind of clinical interest usually reserved for laboratory specimens. "Well, sir," I said, "I suppose we bring a different perspective on problem solving." "Different how?" I glanced around the table, where every alien face was waiting for me to say something stupid that would confirm their preconceptions about human inadequacy. "We're really good at improvisation," I said finally. "Most species seem to have developed specialized advantages. Enhanced strength, psychic abilities, natural weapons, that sort of thing. Humans had to get creative just to survive on our own planet. We learned that sometimes the best solution isn't the most obvious one. Commander Stormwind studied me for a long moment. Improvisation, he said. How quaint. I suppose we'll see how well your creativity serves you during actual combat training. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and cadet. The Academy's evaluation matches begin next week. I'm looking forward to seeing exactly what human improvisation looks like against proper military technique. After he left, the table fell silent for a moment before Luna let out what could only be described as a giggle. Evaluation matches, she said. Oh, this is going to be entertaining. Jake, you do realize that evaluation matches are full-contact combat scenarios, right? They're designed to test each species' natural advantages against real opponents. And humans, Zara added with clinical precision, have no natural advantages. Grunt rumbled something that Luna translated as he says it was nice meeting you and hopes you have good medical insurance. I looked around the table at these apex predators who were already mentally composing my obituary, and I couldn't help but smile. You know what? I said, taking a bite of what I really hoped was food. This is going to be fun. The breaking point came during what the Academy cheerfully called tactical limitations and species-appropriate combat roles, which was basically a fancy way of saying, let's spend an hour explaining to everyone why they're going to fail at everything. Professor Quill Sharpbeak, a Skylari who made Luna look humble by comparison, was delivering a lecture on the importance of realistic self-assessment in combat scenarios. The classroom was one of those amphitheater-style setups where everyone could get a good view of whoever was being humiliated at the front, and today's volunteer victim was apparently me. Now, as we can see from Cadet Martinez's physiological profile, Professor Sharpbeak was saying, gesturing at a holographic display that showed my body in embarrassing detail, humans represent what we might call a baseline species. No enhanced musculature, no natural weaponry, no defensive adaptations, no psychic capabilities. The display helpfully highlighted all the ways I was apparently inadequate compared to every other species in the room. My lack of claws, my pathetic bone density, my laughably slow reflexes. It was like a medical examination designed by someone who really wanted to make sure I understood exactly how screwed I was. The question becomes, Professor Sharpbeak continued, clearly enjoying himself, how do we integrate such limitations into a cohesive military structure? The answer, of course, is support roles. Communications, logistics, technical maintenance. Areas where physical inadequacy is less of a liability. I could feel every pair of eyes in the classroom focused on me. Some looked sympathetic, most looked amused, and a few looked like they were taking notes for future reference. Vex was sitting in the row behind me, and I could practically hear him trying not to laugh. Professor, came a voice from the back of the room. It was Apex Crushclaw, the Academy's undefeated combat champion, and the kind of student that instructors probably had nightmares about disappointing. Apex was Vesperian, which meant he looked like someone had designed the perfect killing machine, and then decided to give it an attitude problem. 6.5 feet of chitinous armor, razor-sharp claws, and reflexes that could probably catch bullets. Yes, Cadet Crushclaw. I was wondering, Apex said with the kind of casual arrogance that comes from never losing a fight, if it might be educational to demonstrate proper combat assessment techniques. Perhaps a practical exercise showing how different species' capabilities translate to actual combat scenarios. The professor's feathers ruffled with excitement. An excellent suggestion, Cadet Martinez. Would you be willing to participate in a demonstration match? Nothing too strenuous, of course. Just a basic sparring session to illustrate the principles we've been discussing. And there it was. The moment I'd been waiting for since I arrived at this place. Every conversation, every condescending comment, every pitying look had been building up to this. They wanted a demonstration, fine, I'd give them a demonstration they'd never forget. Actually, I said, standing up in a way that I hoped looked casual, rather than like I was about to do something spectacularly stupid. I have a better idea. The classroom went dead silent. Professor Sharpbeak's beak opened slightly, as if he couldn't quite believe what he was hearing. I challenged Cadet Crushclaw to a formal sparring match. I continued, looking directly at Apex. Full contact, standard academy rules, with the entire instructor staff as witnesses. You could have heard a pin drop. Actually, you probably could have heard a pin drop 3-star systems away. Apex's compound eyes focused on me with the kind of predatory interest usually reserved for wounded prey. A formal challenge, he said slowly, as if he was savoring the words. How delightfully old-fashioned, and completely suicidal, but I appreciate the traditional approach. Professor Sharpbeak was making frantic wing gestures. Cadet Martinez, I don't think you fully understand what you're suggesting. Formal sparring matches are designed for species with comparable physical capabilities. The insurance implications alone, with respect, Professor, I interrupted, I understand exactly what I'm suggesting. Unless, of course, Cadet Crushclaw is concerned about the insurance implications. Apex let out a sound that was somewhere between laughter and the noise a chainsaw makes when it's really enjoying its work. Oh, I accept. Absolutely, completely, and enthusiastically accept. When would you like to schedule your educational experience? How about tonight? I said. Main arena, full academy attendance. Let's make it a real learning opportunity. The buzz of conversation that erupted from the classroom sounded like a hive of very excited wasps. Students were already pulling out their communication devices, probably placing bets on how quickly I was going to get demolished. Some were looking at me with something that might have been admiration for my stupidity. Others were clearly calculating whether they should alert the medical facility to prepare for incoming casualties. Professor Sharpbeak was looking back and forth between Apex and me like he was watching a traffic accident in slow motion. Cadet Martinez, are you absolutely certain about this? Perhaps we could arrange a more controlled demonstration. No thank you, Professor, I said, with what I hoped was convincing confidence. I think a real match will be much more educational for everyone involved. Apex stood up, his full height making it clear exactly why he was the Academy's undefeated champion. Excellent. I'll try to make it last at least a few minutes. For educational purposes, of course. As the class broke up, students clustering around Apex to congratulate him on his upcoming easy victory, Vex sidled up to me with the expression of someone who was watching a friend prepare to jump off a cliff. Jake, he said quietly. I realize we haven't known each other very long, but I feel obligated to point out that you've just challenged a professional killer to a fight. A professional killer who has never lost a match. A professional killer who probably weighs twice what you do, and has natural weapons that could probably cut through steel plating. I noticed that, I replied, gathering up my notes with hands that were definitely not shaking. Thanks for the recap. So just to be clear, your plan is to get into a ring with Apex Crushclaw, and hope for the best. I looked at Vex, then around the classroom where students were still buzzing with excitement about the upcoming massacre. Vex, I said, trust me, I have a plan. He stared at me for a long moment. Your plan better be spectacular, because otherwise tomorrow they're going to be using you as a cautionary tale in orientation classes. As I walked out of the classroom, I could feel the weight of every stare following me. Some sympathetic, some excited, some already mentally composing my eulogy. But that was fine. Let them underestimate me. Let them assume this was going to be a quick educational beatdown. After all, the best part about being underestimated is the look on everyone's face when you prove them wrong. The main arena that evening looked like someone had designed a gladiatorial coliseum for an interstellar audience with serious bloodlust issues. Tiered seating rose up in concentric circles around a central combat platform that was probably engineered to withstand small explosions, and judging by the excited chatter from the packed stands, the audience was expecting to see exactly that kind of action. Word had spread through the academy faster than gossip at a high school reunion. Every student, instructor, and maintenance worker who could squeeze into the arena had shown up to watch what was being billed as either the most entertaining 5 minutes in academy history or the shortest suicide attempt on record. The betting pools had apparently reached epic proportions, with odds running about 3,000 to 1 against me lasting longer than 30 seconds. I stood in the preparation area doing what I hoped looked like pre-fight stretching while actually trying to keep my hands from shaking. The academy had provided standard combat gear, which for humans meant some basic padding and a helmet that probably wouldn't do much good if Apex decided to get creative with those claws. For comparison, Apex's gear looked like it had been designed by someone who understood that Vesperians were essentially organic weapons platforms. Last chance to back out with dignity intact, came a familiar voice. Vex had somehow talked his way into the preparation area, probably by claiming he was my corner support. He was looking at me with the expression of someone watching a friend prepare to stick his hand into a wood chipper. What dignity? I asked, adjusting my gear. I'm about to fight a professional killer in front of an audience that's already planning my funeral. Dignity left the building about the same time common sense did. Through the entrance to the arena I could see Apex warming up with the kind of fluid, deadly movements that made it clear why he'd never lost a match. He was running through combat forms that looked like they'd been choreographed by someone who really understood the art of dismemberment, his claws leaving score marks in the practice targets that would probably require industrial equipment to repair. Commander Stormwind appeared at my shoulder, his expression unreadable. Cadet Martinez, the medical team is standing by, and we've prepared appropriate documentation for your next of kin. Are you absolutely certain you want to proceed with this demonstration? Wouldn't miss it for the world, sir, I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt, though I appreciate the medical preparations. Very thorough. The commander studied me for a moment. Cadet, I've been training warriors for over 40 standard years. I've seen courage, I've seen stupidity, and I've seen everything in between. What exactly do you think you're going to accomplish out there? I looked out at the arena where Apex was now performing what appeared to be a victory dance approximately 15 minutes early, and at the crowd that was already cheering for the upcoming massacre. Honestly, sir, I'm going to show everyone what humans are really capable of. Which is being significantly more trouble than anyone expects. The announcement system crackled to life, and Professor Sharpbeak's voice echoed through the arena with the kind of theatrical enthusiasm usually reserved for public executions. Ladies, gentlemen, and distinguished members of all species, welcome to tonight's educational demonstration. In the red corner, representing the Vesperian warrior caste with an undefeated record of 47 victories, Cadet Apex Crushclaw. The crowd erupted in cheers as Apex emerged from his preparation area. He moved with the kind of predatory grace that made it clear why Vesperians were considered one of the galaxy's premier warrior species. His chitinous armor gleamed under the arena lights, and his claws extended and retracted in a display that was probably meant to be intimidating but mostly just looked like he was really excited about the upcoming violence. And in the blue corner, Professor Sharpbeak continued, his voice taking on the tone of someone announcing a particularly tragic accident, representing Earth and the human species, Cadet Jake Martinez. The crowd's reaction to my entrance was mixed. There was some polite applause, a few encouraging shouts from what I assumed were the more sporting members of the audience, and a lot of laughter that suggested most people viewed this as comedy rather than combat. I walked to the center of the arena where Apex was waiting with the patient expression of someone who was trying to decide which limb to break first. So, he said conversationally, any last words for your species' historical records? Just one piece of advice, I replied. Don't get cocky. Apex's laugh sounded like gravel in a garbage disposal. Cocky? Human, I'm not being cocky. I'm being realistic. You're about to receive an education in why certain species dominate galactic combat and others provide technical support. The referee, a crystalline rockborn who looked like he could probably stop a tank by standing in front of it, raised his massive arm. Standard Academy rules apply. Match continues until one participant yields, is incapacitated, or I determine that continuing would result in permanent injury. Combatants, prepare yourselves. Apex settled into a combat stance that looked like it had been developed over centuries of successful violence. His claws extended to their full length, his compound eyes focused on me with predatory intensity, and his entire body coiled with the kind of potential energy that suggested someone was about to have a very bad day. I meanwhile adopted what could charitably be called a fighting stance but probably looked more like someone who was trying to remember which end of himself was supposed to face forward. Begin. The referee announced. Apex moved like liquid death, closing the distance between us in a blur of chitinous armor and razor-sharp claws. His first strike was clearly meant to be impressive rather than immediately fatal, a sweeping claw attack that would have opened me up like a can of sardines if I'd been standing where he expected me to be. Instead, I stumbled backward with all the grace of someone falling downstairs, barely avoiding the strike while managing to look like I'd narrowly escaped death through pure luck rather than any kind of skill. The crowd loved it. Laughter rippled through the stands as I windmilled my arms for balance and generally looked like someone who had no business being within 100 miles of a combat arena. Apex paused, looking slightly confused. Are you actually trying to fight, or is this some kind of interpretive dance? I'm doing my best, I replied, continuing to stumble around like someone who'd forgotten how his own legs worked. This is actually going better than I expected. What Apex didn't realize, and what the laughing crowd couldn't see, was that every stumble was calculated. Every awkward movement was putting me exactly where I needed to be while making me look completely harmless. I was studying his attack patterns, timing his reflexes, and figuring out exactly how his confidence was going to become his weakness. Apex launched into a combination attack that should have ended the match, a series of precise strikes designed to disable rather than kill. He was clearly enjoying himself, showing off for the crowd while demonstrating proper Vesperian combat technique. I continued my performance as the galaxy's most incompetent fighter, dodging his attacks through what appeared to be miraculous accidents while actually maneuvering him exactly where I wanted him. The crowd was eating it up, cheering for Apex's technical prowess while laughing at my apparent incompetence. Is this really the best humanity has to offer? Apex called out to the crowd, pausing in his assault to gesture dramatically. I've fought training dummies that put up more resistance. The crowd roared with laughter and approval. Even the instructors were looking amused rather than concerned, clearly viewing this as exactly the kind of educational demonstration they'd hoped for. Which was perfect. Because while everyone was laughing at the clumsy human who couldn't fight his way out of a paper bag, I was learning everything I needed to know about Apex Crush Claw. His timing, his preferred attack angles, his showboating tendencies, and most importantly, his complete lack of respect for human capabilities. Come on, human, Apex said, settling back into his combat stance. At least try to make this educational. The audience is expecting a demonstration of proper combat technique, not a comedy routine. I straightened up, still looking shaky but managing what I hoped was a determined expression. You're right, I should probably start taking this seriously. Finally, Apex muttered, preparing for what he clearly expected to be the final exchange of the match. That's when I smiled, and that's when everything changed. The change wasn't dramatic at first. That's the thing about humans that apparently doesn't show up in any galactic database. We don't just flip a switch and become dangerous. We ease into it, like water slowly coming to a boil. I stopped stumbling. It was such a subtle shift that most of the crowd didn't notice immediately. But Apex did. His compound eyes refocused on me with the first hint of actual attention he'd shown since the match began. Finally decided to participate? He asked, circling me with renewed interest. I was starting to think you'd forgotten this was supposed to be a combat demonstration. Oh, I've been participating the whole time, I replied, my stance shifting from hapless victim to something that might charitably be called competent. I was just getting a feel for your style. Very impressive, by the way. Textbook Vesperian combat technique. Apex's head tilted slightly, a predatory gesture that suggested he was recalculating his assessment of the situation. Getting a feel for my style. Human, you've spent the last 5 minutes looking like you were having a seizure. That's the thing about humans, I said, beginning to circle him in return. We're really good at looking like we don't know what we're doing. It's one of our best survival traits. The crowd's laughter was starting to die down as they noticed the shift in dynamics. The hapless human who'd been stumbling around the arena was moving with something that looked suspiciously like purpose. Apex launched another attack, the same combination he'd used successfully 3 times already. Except this time, instead of barely dodging through miraculous incompetence, I sidestepped with efficient precision and did something that made the entire arena gasp. I talked back. Wow, same combination again. That's either really confident or really predictable. I'm going with predictable. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. Apex had spent his entire fighting career being feared, respected, and certainly never mocked during actual combat. The idea that his opponent might be critiquing his technique while actively fighting him was so far outside his experience that it visibly threw him off balance. What did you just say? He demanded, his perfect combat form wavering slightly. I said you're predictable, I replied, ducking under a swipe that was noticeably less precise than his earlier attacks. High-low-high combination, always leading with the right claw. Always the same recovery time. It's very systematic. This was the moment I introduced Apex to humanity's secret weapon. We fight dirty, and we're absolutely shameless about it. You know what's funny? I continued, weaving between his increasingly frustrated attacks. Your instructors probably told you that humans are weak because we don't have natural weapons. But they missed the point entirely. We don't need natural weapons because we learned to use everything else. I demonstrated by grabbing a handful of arena sand and flinging it directly at his compound eyes. It was a move that would have been considered unsporting in any civilized combat system, which is exactly why it worked perfectly. Apex reared back, clawing at his eyes while making sounds that suggested he was learning some new and creative swear words. That's cheating. That's surviving, I corrected, using his momentary blindness to land the first solid hit of the match, a quick jab to what I hoped was a vulnerable spot in his armor. Rule number 1 of human combat. There are no rules. The crowd's reaction was shifting from amusement to something approaching shock. This wasn't following the script. The human was supposed to be losing gracefully, not turning the Academy's champion into a source of entertainment. You want to know what else your research missed? I asked, staying mobile while Apex tried to clear his vision. Humans are persistence hunters. We don't chase prey by being faster or stronger. We chase prey by being too stubborn to give up. Apex's vision cleared just in time to see me coming at him with a combination that would have made any military combat instructor weep with joy. Not because it was technically perfect, but because it was completely unpredictable. High, low, faint, actual attack from an angle he hadn't considered, followed by another handful of sand. "Stop throwing dirt," he roared. His perfect combat composure completely shattered. "Stop being predictable." I shot back, landing another hit that actually staggered him. This is what happens when you fight someone who learned combat on a planet where literally everything is trying to kill you. The arena had gone dead silent except for the sound of our fight. Students who'd been laughing and placing bets were now leaning forward with expressions of dawning realization. The instructors were looking at each other with the kind of confusion that suggested they were going to need to revise some training manuals. Apex was getting angry, which was exactly what I wanted. Angry fighters make mistakes, and mistakes were something I could exploit. His attacks were becoming more powerful but less controlled, more aggressive but less precise. "You know what the real difference is between humans and every other species in this academy?" I asked, dodging a wild swing that left him overextended. "Everyone else developed one really good way to fight. Claws, psychic powers, natural armor, whatever. Humans developed every possible way to fight because we had to." I demonstrated by immediately shifting tactics, going from mobile harassment to grappling, something that Apex clearly hadn't expected from someone he'd categorized as physically inferior. "Wrestling," I announced cheerfully, as I got him in a headlock. "Learned this one from a species that thought the best way to settle disputes was to see who could squeeze harder." Apex's chitinous armor made grappling interesting, but human stubbornness made it effective. He was stronger, but I was more flexible and significantly more willing to accept a little pain in exchange for a tactical advantage. "Let go," he demanded, trying to use his claws to dislodge me. "Can't do that," I replied, adjusting my grip. "This is what we call a teaching moment. You see, every species in this academy has been designed by evolution to excel at one particular type of combat. Humans were designed by evolution to excel at not dying." The crowd was starting to murmur now, the kind of confused discussion that happens when people realize they're watching something they don't understand. Apex was supposed to be winning. This was supposed to be educational in the way that watching a predator catch prey is educational. Instead, they were watching their undefeated champion get systematically dismantled by someone who was apparently making up his fighting style as he went along. "The thing about not dying," I continued, releasing the headlock and immediately switching to a completely different approach, "is that it makes you very good at adapting. Watch this." I pulled out what I like to call the humanity special, complete tactical unpredictability combined with an absolute refusal to fight fair. I went from grappling to striking to something that might have been dancing if dancing involved trying to break your partner's joints. Apex was completely off balance now, both literally and figuratively. His perfect technique was useless against someone who wasn't following any recognizable combat system. His superior physical capabilities were being neutralized by someone who refused to engage him on his terms. "This is impossible," he gasped, trying to land a strike on an opponent who was apparently fighting according to rules that didn't exist. "You're not following any established combat methodology." "That's because I'm not following any established combat methodology," I replied, somehow managing to sound conversational while actively avoiding being disemboweled. "I'm making it up as I go along. It's called improvisation, and it's what humans do best." The arena was no longer silent. Students were talking excitedly, instructors were taking notes, and Commander Stormwind was watching with an expression that suggested he was rapidly reassessing some fundamental assumptions about galactic combat theory. Apex was breathing hard now, his perfect armor showing the first signs of actual damage. More importantly, his confidence was completely shattered. He'd gone from treating this as a quick demonstration to realizing he was in an actual fight with someone who apparently didn't understand that he was supposed to lose. "You want to know the real secret?" I asked, circling him like a predator that had just realized its prey was wounded. "Every species in this academy learned to fight other members of their own species. Humans learned to fight everything. We've been the underdog in every conflict we've ever had, and we've survived all of them." That's when I saw it. The moment Apex realized he might actually lose. The moment his perfect warrior composure cracked completely and revealed something that looked suspiciously like fear. "Time for the final lesson," I said, settling into a stance that probably looked like nothing any instructor had ever seen before. "What lesson?" Apex asked, his voice showing the first signs of actual concern. I smiled, and for the first time since the match began, it wasn't a friendly smile. "Never underestimate someone who has nothing left to lose." What happened next became Academy legend. The kind of story that gets told in hushed tones during orientation week to explain why you should never ever underestimate a human. Apex, desperate to salvage his reputation and increasingly panicked by an opponent who refused to follow any logical combat pattern, made the classic mistake of angry fighters everywhere. He overcommitted to a finishing move. It was a beautiful strike, textbook perfect Vesperian technique, designed to end fights quickly and dramatically. His claws extended to their maximum length, his entire body coiled with predatory power, and he launched himself at me with the kind of devastating attack that had made him the Academy's undefeated champion. If I'd been where he expected me to be, the match would have ended with me in several pieces, and Apex standing triumphant over my remains. Instead, I did something that apparently no opponent in 47 previous matches had ever thought to try. I stepped sideways, not a desperate dodge, not a panicked scramble, just a simple, efficient step that put me exactly where I needed to be, while Apex's momentum carried him exactly where I wanted him to go. You know what humans call this? I asked conversationally as I grabbed his extended arm with both hands. Leverage. The physics of what happened next were really quite simple. Apex had committed his entire body weight to an attack that was designed to connect with a stationary target. When that target moved, and then used his own momentum against him, the results were as predictable as they were spectacular. I pivoted, using his forward momentum and superior mass to my advantage, and applied a technique that every human learns in basic self-defense classes: how to use an attacker's strength against them. The sound of Apex's arm breaking echoed through the arena like a gunshot. It wasn't a clean break. It wasn't a merciful break. It was the kind of compound fracture that makes medical professionals wince and spectators suddenly remember they have somewhere else to be. The crack was followed immediately by a scream that suggested Apex was discovering entirely new levels of pain he hadn't known existed. The arena went dead silent. Not the hushed silence of an audience waiting for something to happen, but the complete, absolute silence of several hundred beings trying to process something that their brains were insisting couldn't be real. Apex collapsed to his knees, cradling his shattered arm while making sounds that were probably swear words in several languages. His perfect chitinous armor, his superior reflexes, his decades of combat training, all rendered completely useless by a human who had apparently learned to fight by watching action movies and reading survival manuals. I stood over him, breathing hard, but not even close to finished, and addressed the stunned crowd. For those of you taking notes, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the silent arena, that's what we call a teaching moment. The lesson is there's a difference between being the strongest and being the smartest, and humans specialize in being the smartest. The referee, a crystalline rockborn who had probably overseen hundreds of matches without ever seeing anything like this, seemed to have forgotten how to speak. He stared at Apex's obviously broken arm, then at me, then back at Apex, as if he was trying to solve a mathematical equation that didn't make sense. Match to Cadet Martinez, he finally managed, his voice barely audible. That's when the arena exploded. Not literally, though given the level of shocked excitement, it might as well have. Students were on their feet, shouting questions and observations and what sounded like revised betting odds. Instructors were huddled in intense conversations, clearly trying to figure out what they'd just witnessed and what it meant for everything they thought they knew about galactic combat theory. Commander Stormwind made his way down to the arena floor with the expression of someone who had just watched the laws of physics take a coffee break. He looked at Apex, who was being attended to by medical personnel and was clearly going to need some serious reconstruction work, then at me. Cadet Martinez, he said slowly, that was educational. Thank you, sir, I replied, trying to look like I hadn't just turned the Academy's understanding of human capabilities completely upside down. I told you we were good at improvisation. Indeed. The commander studied me for a long moment. Tell me, Cadet, was that technique part of Earth's standard military training? Not exactly, sir. That was more of a combination of playground fighting, bar-room brawling, and what my grandmother used to call dealing with bullies. The commander's expression suggested he was rapidly reassessing several decades of military theory. Your grandmother sounds like she would have made an excellent tactical instructor. She definitely would have enjoyed this, I agreed, looking around at the chaos I'd created. Students were still arguing about what they'd witnessed, instructors were taking notes furiously, and someone in the medical bay was probably going to have a very interesting story to tell about putting a Vesperian warrior back together. Luna Brightfeather appeared at my shoulder, her colorful feathers practically vibrating with excitement. Jake, that was incredible. How did you know his attack pattern? How did you predict his momentum? How did you calculate the leverage dynamics? I didn't, I said honestly. I just waited for him to do something stupid and then took advantage of it. Zara Voidstrike materiated next to us with that floating thing she did, her violet eyes studying me with newfound interest. Your psychological profile is going to need significant revision, she said, matter-of-factly. The aggression markers, the tactical assessment capabilities, the stress response patterns. Everything we thought we knew about human combat psychology appears to be incomplete. Or maybe, I suggested, you just made the mistake of assuming that because we don't have claws and armor, we don't know how to fight. Grunt Ironhide rumbled up to us, his crystalline form reflecting the arena lights as he made the sounds that apparently constituted conversation in his species. Luna translated with obvious amusement. Grunt says he's revising his assessment of human durability and would like to know if all members of your species fight like homicidal acrobats. Only the good ones, I replied, which seemed to satisfy him. Vex arrived looking like someone who had just watched his roommate casually violate several laws of nature. Jake, he said, I have questions. So many questions, starting with what exactly did they teach you in human military training? Same thing they taught everyone else, I said. How to win, by breaking people's arms. By any means necessary. The medical team was wheeling Apex out of the arena on a hover stretcher, his arm immobilized in what looked like enough medical equipment to service a small hospital. As they passed, he managed to lift his head and look at me with an expression that mixed pain, confusion, and what might have been grudging respect. How? He asked weakly. Easy, I replied. You assumed that because I looked harmless, I was harmless. Classic mistake. Commander Stormwind cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. Cadets, I believe tonight's demonstration has provided us with some valuable insights into the diversity of combat approaches within the galactic community. Classes will resume tomorrow morning, though I suspect our curriculum discussions may require some. As the crowd began to disperse, still buzzing with conversation about what they'd witnessed, I found myself standing in the center of the arena with a small group of students and instructors who were looking at me like I was some kind of fascinating scientific specimen. So I said, brushing arena sand off my combat gear, anyone else interested in a friendly sparring match? I'm just getting warmed up. The silence that followed was so complete you could have heard a pin drop in the next star system. No? I continued cheerfully. That's probably for the best. I'd hate for anyone to think humans were showing off. As I walked out of the arena, I could hear the conversations starting up behind me. Discussions about human combat capabilities, tactical unpredictability, and the need to completely revise their assessment of Earth's military potential. Which was exactly what I'd hoped for. Because sometimes the best way to earn respect is to break something expensive in front of everyone who matters. And sometimes the best way to prove you're not harmless is to demonstrate exactly how much trouble you can cause when people assume you are. The Academy would never underestimate humans again. And that, I thought with satisfaction, was a pretty good day's work.